Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Vermont Report on Palestine, Israel. I'm Mark Hage. It's Monday, June 16th, 2025, the 617th day of Israel's war of genocide against the Palestinian people of Gaza. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, 55,315 Palestinians have been killed, more than 5,000 since mid-March, when Israel unilaterally breached the ceasefire. Nearly 129,000 Palestinians have been injured or wounded, many severely, and an estimated 14,000 Palestinians are reported missing. Our first report tonight is an interview with Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. Ms. Albanese spoke with a journalist at El Arabiya Media. She discusses the work of her office, the appalling humanitarian crisis in Gaza, including the weaponization of starvation, and she defends her legal argument that what is happening in Gaza today is indeed a genocide. Here now is Francesca Albanese.
Well, my guest today is Francesca Albanese, who is the UN's Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. She was the first woman to be appointed to this position in May 2022. Then, 17 months later, we all know what happened on the 7th of October 2023. Well, her role as the UN's Special Rapporteur has just been renewed, extending her mandate until April 2028. Francesca Albanese, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just first of all, how do you see your role? What does it entail as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So as a Special Rapporteur of the United Nations, I am appointed by the member states of the UN sitting in the Human Rights Council to monitor, document, and report on human rights violations taking place in the occupied Palestinian territory, so the territory that Israel has occupied for 57 years now. The Gaza Strip is Jerusalem and the West Bank. And I would have to produce 2 reports per year after visiting the occupied Palestinian territory, but I am prevented from doing so by Israel.
Okay, we're going to talk a bit more about that, and we're also going to talk about your latest report in just a moment. But I just want to ask you to cast your mind back to the 7th of October 2023. You were in that position already, as I said in the introduction. What went through your mind as that news broke?
It was a horrible, horrible day because there was enormous violence against Israelis. It was quite new as a scene, and it was shocking all the more. And so it was a day of very strong feelings, a day of revolt inside, because I didn't know how I would do this, I would continue to do this job. But it took me a few hours to come back to senses and realize that this violent event, was the product of over 70 years of violence and depredation of Palestine and the Palestinians, and it had to be resolved as soon as possible. This was the opportunity to go and resolve the root causes of all violence in the land between the river and the sea, which is an illegal occupation turned into apartheid, and unfortunately now escalating into a genocide.
Okay, we're going to talk about some of those legal definitions in a moment, like genocide, because I know you have a legal background. But I just want to ask you before that, we were saying in the introduction your mandate has just been renewed. Obviously, in Israel, not everyone is happy about that. We heard Danny Danon, the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, saying, quote, "The renewal of Francesca Albanese's mandate is a disgrace and a moral stain on the United Nations. Albanese is a notorious anti-Semite who has repeatedly expressed not only biased views against Israel, but also hateful rhetoric targeting the Jewish people as a whole." I'm sure you saw that. What do you say to that?
No, I didn't. I hadn't seen it. But, I've been receiving these attacks since even before becoming a special rapporteur. First of all, the real disgrace for the United Nations is that there are 60,000 people who have been killed in 20 months, and Gaza has been turned into a meat grinder, and it continues under our eyes. And while member states starts uttering words of condemnation while trading with one hand in weapons and trading with goods and with the other. So this is the real disgrace. Then Francesca Albanese being an anti-Semite, not really. I mean, criticism of the state of Israel is all the more necessary given the crimes that it commits institutionally and structurally against the Palestinians. It's not my fault. It's a fact, and it's a responsibility I have from the United Nations. Then the weaponization of anti-Semitism is vile, because anti-Semitism exists. It's real as Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism, but weaponizing it to justify crimes against a virtually defenseless populations, it's really ludicrous.
You talk about the current reality in Gaza, and we've been reporting extensively on that here on Al Arabiya. We heard an official at the ICRC describing the situation there as worse than hell. Is that roughly how you view the situation there?
Yeah, I think. Look, again, I've not set foot in Gaza in the last years, but I've had my eyes and ears on Gaza for over 600 days, and it's been horrible. I really don't understand how we keep functioning with all what we have seen, which is not just, and I'm not saying just in order to downplay what I'm saying, but I've seen on the one hand the brutality, unleashed against the Palestinians as a people in all its forms. It's been really vicious. But on the other hand, I've also collected evidence on the people who have done it. And the executioners of this genocide are really young people and young Israelis, and who have been turned into political pawns in an ideological war in order to gain what? Land. It's all about the land.
And as you said at the beginning, this is a land that you're not able to visit. And I'm just assuming that in your capacity as a special rapporteur, I mean, that must be extremely frustrating for you, isn't it?
Well, what is frustrating is the fact that this is a situation that is not new. This has been ongoing the occupation has been ongoing for 57 years during which Israel has been allowed to build colonies after colonies, which are a war crime, to forcibly displace the Palestinians, which amounts to a crimes against humanity, in perpetuity, without ever being accountable. This is frustrating. It's also frustrating to see member states condemning but not following suit with words, and we know why, because Israel is so entangled in our economy through the United States, but not only. It's very difficult to disentangle Israel from the purchase of weapons that takes place from India to Europe, and from the financial interests that are connected to this. It has very much to do with profits. This is frustrating. And of course, it's also frustrating to see member states that nowadays the best thing they can come up with is the two-state solution. What an affront to the Palestinians who are dying. What an affront to the Israelis who have died. What an affront to those who really want peace and know that peace cannot happen without full respect of human rights of everyone, and keep on talking about a political process that they don't even believe in, because we know that many European countries are not ready to recognize the state of Palestine. They're just ready to put money on the capacity building of the Palestinian Authority, which means kicking the can in the air in perpetuity. So this is what is really frustrating for me.
Are there any historical parallels that you can draw in your mind to what's happening in Gaza right now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think that this is, to understand this, what is happening to the Palestinians, one needs to understand what 500 years of colonialism, of European-led colonialism, have done to the world. Millions of people have been genocided from Australia, Canada, the United States. What we call liberal democracies today are all countries birthed from genocides of indigenous people, controlling the land, controlling the resources, displacing the indigenous, replacing them with the settlers. That's so different from what's happening to Palestine. What is shocking is that it's happening in 2025. We have had 70 years plus of international human rights system, and still, and again, the international law is as strong as the will of states to implement it. And it's clear today that, again, commercial interests come before the life of people. But if I have to think of a parallel as well, as a European, I'm very. I was brought up with a lesson learned, what we thought were the lesson learned from the Holocaust that we committed, from the genocide that we committed in our own land, on our own European soil. The Jewish people, together with the Roma and Sinti, and together with the disabled people, were exterminated because they were the other, compared to the idea of the pure race. That was not something that traveled across some crazy people with something like the Nazis. It's something that was tolerated by the society, because the Jewish people were our brothers and sisters taken away from our cities, kicked out of civil life through regular laws. I mean, in my country, we kicked out the Jewish people of ordinary civil life with the racial laws, preventing them to take part on civil life, to work in universities, in hospitals, etc. This is how genocide starts. It doesn't. We fail to understand that genocide is not about the means, the concentration camps, rather than the machetes. A genocide is the intentional destruction of a people as such. And what we have done to the Jewish people reminds me of what is happening today to the Palestinians, starving them, torturing them, raping them to death, while everyone is watching. Everyone is watching, from Europe to the United States to the Arab region. And is it possible that no one, 191 member states, other than the United States and Israel, 191 member states cannot stop it altogether?
You raised some interesting points, and I wanted to get back to the word genocide, because you've used it on a number of occasions already, just a few short minutes into this interview. I want to ask you, you've got this background as a legal scholar, and I'd like to ask you what legal basis supports this claim that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, just in terms of the label and the terminology. Talk us through that.
Yeah. First of all, I mean, had we had this interview in March or April or May 2024, I would understand your question, because back then I was pretty much a lone voice together with other special rapporteurs talking of genocide. But today there seems to be a growing consensus about that. The Commission of Inquiry on Israel-Palestine of the UN recognized acts of genocide. The Special Committee of the UN on Israeli practices has recognized that Israel is committing genocide. Amnesty International has produced a 300-page report saying that Israel is committing genocide. Forensic Architecture has provided 800-page report documenting the cartography of a genocide. There are Israeli genocide, Holocaust scholars who are saying that we cannot avoid the reality that Israel is committing genocide. So let me unpack it. What constitutes genocide is explained at Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, which refers to the genocide is the intentional destruction of a group as such. And the Palestinians are a group as such who's been recognized at risk of genocide already by the International Court of Justice in January 2024. Israel has been ordered measure to stop its genocidal acts that could be genocidal, like acts of killing, infliction of severe bodily and mental harm, like torture or sadism against the targeted group, or creation of conditions of life calculated to bring about destruction among the group, or the prevention of birth, like destroying the fertility clinic. So this is what constitutes genocide. Israel has received provisional measures ordered by the ICJ in January, in March, in May. There have been resolutions calling for a ceasefire already in June last year. Nothing has stopped. The thing is that how can you miss the genocidal intent when it has been declared, said, there have been called for destruction of Gaza, not uninvolved civilians, there is no one innocent, even the children are involved. There has been an increasing upfront call to kill kids in Gaza. And it's not just that they've said it. They've done it. Israel has the most sophisticated, one of the most sophisticated armies in the world. So every missile it launches, it's for a purpose. And the reason why this attack on Gaza has been totally disproportionate, totally indiscriminate, totally in disregard of the principle of proportionality of military action, has turned Gaza has pulverized Gaza. So Gaza has been destroyed. And one response for genocide, not just for the actions, but for the omissions. So this is not just the responsibility, in my view, of two members of the government who are now wanted, one current, one past, who are wanted by the ICC for crimes against humanity and war crimes, which can well coexist in a genocidal climate, in a genocidal spectrum. Okay. But what have the other members of the government done? Supported it? What have the members of the parliament done? Encouraging the raping of Palestinians in jail, the killing of children. And what has the judiciary done? What is the population, the majority population in Israel doing while a minority protests against it? So again, I don't know what else does Israel need to do to be found guilty of genocide.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Who, in your opinion, bears the greatest responsibility for the humanitarian catastrophe which we can see on our screens in Gaza? Does it rest with one person, or to whom do you attribute full responsibility?
No, I don't think, as I said, it doesn't rest with one person. Genocide is a collective endeavor. It's never an act, it's a process. And indeed, my deepest regret as a special rapporteur is that I had been alerted already in 2023 by some Israeli Holocaust studies scholars that the situation was included precursors of genocide. Had I been as knowledgeable as I am now on genocide, I would have totally sided with them. Instead, I ignored that. But what Israel was doing to the Palestinians, the extrajudicial killings without accountability ever, the forced displacement, the segregation, the mass incarceration, the dehumanization against the Palestinians was one of the extreme. So the responsibility for it rests first and foremost with Israel. With Israel as a state. There is no question about that. And it's just that, unfortunately, it takes time for people to come around and realize what they're doing. We have never been good at complying with that obligation in the Genocide Convention, that is to prevent genocide. How do you prevent genocide if people deny that? Even when there was the ICJ even when there was an ICJ set of provisional measures saying Israel risks to be committing genocide, or there is a plausible risk of irreparable harm for the Palestinians under the Genocide Convention, no one really halted the transfer of weapons. No one really imposed the sanctions on Israel. So you see, it's an whole system. It looks like a joint criminal enterprise. Of course, there are states who are very responsible, like the United States, and of course, its responsibility should be assessed on a judicial level. But at the same time, other states, what are they doing? There are states who are continuing to provide weapons, and they should be their governments should be investigated for complicity with genocide as soon as possible.
Now, it's reported that you have been targeted because you're outspoken. We can hear that. You've got strong opinions, and you're extremely passionate about this cause. Tell us about those threats and the fact that you've been targeted. Who's targeted you, and what form have the threats taken?
I push back on the fact that I have strong opinions and I'm passionate. First, because they're both incorrect. They're both mischaracterization. I don't have strong opinions. I have a strong sense of what is international law, and I take seriously the commitment to serve the Human Rights Council as I've been requested. The sense I don't have a cause. I'm not committed to a cause at all. I've never engaged on the question of Palestine as an activist. Yes, I've dealt with the question of Palestinian refugees, Palestinian forced displacement, but I didn't know as much as I do know now on Palestine itself, like the occupied Palestinian territory. Even if I've lived there, I've been there serving UNRWA and serving Palestinian refugees. So the thing is that I'm not passionate. I am disgusted. This is what I am, by the failure of the international system for which I, like many, have given really my best years. I've really believed in it and I want it to work. So it's quite different.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Because of being firm, objective, and speaking with integrity, I'm threatened. Yes, but like many.
But tell me about the threats that you faced. I wanted to ask you specifically because it's reported that you have been threatened for expressing the opinions you express and for doing the work you do. Just tell us about that.
I think it's pretty obvious, the fact that I'm accused of being an anti-Semite, while on the other hand, having the support, the appreciation, really there is a cocoon of Jewish organization, Jewish scholars, Jewish people around me. So this has been a real source of strength for me from the very beginning of my mandate. But being accused of as an anti-Semite, as a European, with the past I have, with the sense of consciousness that I have of what we have done, what is our past, it's very heavy. So this has been, or saying that I'm a pro-terror, that I've incited terrorism against Israel, or saying that I have not condemned the crimes that have been committed against Israelis on October 7. These are pure lies, or that I've taken money. I'm doing what I'm doing as a volunteer. I've even put my teaching and my work aside to deal with this, because genocide is something as enormous as anything I've ever done. So because of this, I do receive threats. There are individual threats that have come my way, in various means. And then there are the threats coming from member states who create a violent environment against me, because they really point at me like an evil person, and this is a situation. This is incitement to violence against me. I've arrived to the United States, and for days there were billboards in Times Square and other places with my face, and I was accused of being an anti-Semite or a pro-terrorist, and again, it's very heavy, but at the same time, what can I do? This is what everyone, from students to faculty members to journalists to activists, this is what everyone daring to criticize Israel and the system that today is covering up for Israel as to endure.
So I take the point, and you face threats and harsh words, and I can imagine that can be frightening as well. And I'm wondering if it puts you off. But there are people, obviously, large numbers of people who support what you're doing. What do Palestinians say when they meet you? What sort of things do they say to you?
Thank you. So it's quite emotional, because I understand. I mean, I feel sorry for them that they need internationals to speak about what they're enduring, because they have a strong voice. They are an incredible, noble people, and strongly intellectually from our point of view, and they have been the victims of our misery. Our human misery. I mean, what the Palestinians are enduring speak to our failure, not to theirs. Speak to our lack of humanity, not to theirs. No, absolutely. There is a total outpour of love wherever I go. So this is why I'm saying, yes, the threats are there, and I don't want to talk too much about that, because I don't want to give even more ideas to people to become vile toward me and. Let's say my private life, there is so much love. Where I live in Tunisia, where I travel to other Arab countries, or in Europe, wherever I go, there are people really crying when they see me, which is pretty astonishing. But this is the reality. It's a time that has broken many souls.
Yeah, I wonder how history is going to look back on this chapter. But just to wrap up our conversation, what's your message to world leaders right now?
Why are you doing that? It's not yours. The planet is not yours. The world is not yours. Really, try to think that you're not going to be here for a long time. This is what I would say to the world leaders, knowing that they wouldn't care much. What I feel like doing is sending a message to those who are not traditional leaders, like those who do not control armaments, do not control huge capitals, who do not control algorithms, and have only to lose if they stay in this watching passive mode in the time of a genocide. Yes, as you say, how will history look at us? The point is not how history will look at us. How can we look at ourselves in the mirror when another people is really losing everything? It's time to sacrifice a little bit of our time, a little bit of our comfort in order for these people not to be completely annihilated. But also, if we think that what's happening to the Palestinians is going to be limited to the Palestinians, we're really naive. Our societies will be next.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Next, a presentation by Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan. She is a pediatric intensive care physician who worked for several months in Gaza in 2024 and again this year. In late April, she was invited to present to the European Parliament. Here now is Dr. Haj Hassan.
I was invited here today to speak about what I witnessed in Gaza. What is left to say? What has been shared before me by my co-panelists here and has been said over and over again for the last year and a half is already so damning and both morally and legally sufficient to merit a response. In the words of my close friend, a surgeon in Gaza, when I asked her what I can share with the world, she said, "I don't know what one can say or write honestly. Last time I was asked this question, I felt like screaming in the face of the whole world and telling them, what are you waiting for? You've seen and heard it all." So nothing I can say today can fully encapsulate the catalog of atrocities that I witnessed last year in Gaza, that I witnessed this year in Gaza. Just in the last 10 days that I was in Gaza, this past time, so only 3 weeks ago, in addition to Israel's vicious break of the ceasefire agreement, killing or maiming 100 children every day, according to UNICEF, we had 76 dead bodies in our ER within 2 hours, or in the morgue of the hospital I was based at, early morning on March 18th. In these last 10 days of the time I was in Gaza, the Israeli military also shelled a UN team, killing and maiming members of it, bombed the ICRC offices, directly hit Nasser Hospital, where I was working, with a drone strike, killing 2 patients and injuring others. They completely leveled the only specialty cancer hospital in Gaza. They killed multiple Palestinian journalists, while international journalists are still not allowed in after a year and a half of these crimes, and executed at close range 15 rescue workers, as I'm sure most of you here know, who were desperately trying to rescue the wounded in Rafah, and then subsequently buried them in a mass grave, along with their ambulances and rescue vehicles. What red lines were not crossed in only those 10 days? I'm asking you, at this point, what is left to say? Each of these incidents on its own should have been enough. And if committed on another population, probably would have been enough. My question for you is, why wasn't it? Each one of the people I met in Gaza, each one of the children that I treated, has been on the receiving end of these crimes for a year and a half. Indiscriminate killing, maiming, unlawful detention and torture, forcible transfer, forced starvation, deprivation of education, deprivation of access to clean water and sanitation. What do I tell the patients I saw in Gaza who were the victims of these atrocities and European complicity in them? What do I tell Amina, a 5-year-old with severe burns who lay in the intensive care unit bed, staring at the wall without crying in pain or asking for anything? She, like so many children we treated in Gaza, have witnessed the most horrific crimes perpetrated against them continuously for a year and a half and with full impunity. What do we tell all the children of Gaza about why we let this happen, and for some, why they even enabled it? Or 7-month-old Aline, who was born into this genocide as her family struggled to protect her, only to be bombed, subsequently trapped under the rubble meters away from her home, extracted by a family member when he heard her crying. Aline's eyelashes and hair was singed. Her skin reeked of the weapons provided and funded by Western nations as she clung on to my clothes in the ICU. Aline's mother, father, Aline's mother, father, and 5-year-old sister were all killed. She's the sole survivor of her family, orphaned at the age of 7 months. What are we going to tell Aline if she survives this? I promised myself yet again that I wouldn't cry. I'm clearly not very good at this. Or 5-year-old Muhammad with a penetrating injury to his head, likely a gunshot, who died in the ER when there were no beds in the ICU. He had no surviving family to retrieve his body and was taken to the morgue by the medical team. Do we wash our hands of accountability because his entire family was exterminated, leaving no one to be accountable to? What do we tell 13-year-old Amir, who sustained severe neck trauma after his home was bombed and kept calling for his sister, who he didn't recognize was the girl in the bed next to him because she'd been burned beyond recognition? I tell Amir's story often because I thought about what I would do if I were in Amir's place that day in the ER before he knew that the rest of his family had died. A day later, when he learned this, he whispered to me, "I wish I died with them. Everyone I love is in heaven. I don't want to be here anymore." What do we tell Amir? What do we tell Zakaria's mother, who survived for months on cooked foraged leaves, refusing to eat her ration of bread, made with ground bird feed, so that her 4-year-old son, who was also malnourished, could eat it as Israel destroyed Gaza's agricultural land and blocked food aid at its border, starving an entire population? What do we tell Zakaria's mother? What do we tell my good friend, Mu'tasim, a young healthcare worker whose mother, sister, nephews, and nieces were all violently killed a year ago? And now, 15 months after the ICJ ruled plausible genocide, and Israel unilaterally broke the ceasefire, raining hell on Gaza starting March 18th, killed Mu'tasim's father and brother, paralyzed his only remaining sister. What do we tell him about why provisional measures meant to protect people like his family were just met with accelerated, indiscriminate killing? I asked a few of my colleagues in Gaza what they wanted me to share with the European Parliament today. These are some of their messages. We are in a killing field, not only because of the impact of bombing. We are really waiting in our spots in a killing line. This was an ICU doctor colleague of mine. An ER nurse told me, "Tell them, doctor, we don't have any path left except the path to death, the path of relief and escape from this lying, unjust world." Why is it that only the people of Gaza and Palestine are destined to resist this injustice alone and to resist the occupation that the entire world supports? Why is it that we are destined every day to lose a mother, a brother, a sister, and a friend? Why is it that I'm destined to die and even want death because I'm afraid of losing parts of my body or being disfigured by the bombing, or being lost, or being left trapped under the rubble, or even having them not find my dead body? Or even worse than all of that, to lose your family or even all of your loved ones in one day and then you're left alone. You can't imagine the bitterness of that loss. I don't want my voice to be heard. I don't want to bother them with talk of Gaza and its story. I just want anyone to speak out against this injustice, but not only with words, with their own hands and actions. An anesthetist said, "Did the people really see the charred bodies of children? I just don't understand." That was his only message to you. Pharmacist colleague said, "We are people, not just numbers. We're living in unimaginable suffering that worsens every day. I recently lost faith in anyone that claims to be taking action. We need real action, not just words. There is no accountability. All the international laws they claim to champion have been violated in Gaza, and nobody does anything." What do we tell these healthcare workers? The fate of each of the hospitals where they work across Gaza Strip should have been enough. They should have been the red line, and yet all 36 of the hospitals were not enough. Do you remember the Al Nasser Pediatric Hospital where infant bodies laid connected to ventilators as they decomposed in the ICU after the Israeli military forced the medical staff to evacuate, telling them that the children the patients in the ICU would be evacuated safely? I worked at Nasser Hospital and visited its remains just last month. That hospital where those babies' bodies were decomposing is flattened now by the Israeli military. Or its neighboring Rantisi Pediatric Subspecialty Hospital, where I also worked before. Rantisi Hospital cared for Gaza's sickest children. It was forcibly evacuated and used as a base for the Israeli military, where they intentionally destroyed life-saving equipment. I saw machinery with the motherboards, medical equipment with the motherboards shot at, clearly intending that these life-saving equipment are never used again. Or Al Shifa Hospital, a hospital many of you are probably familiar with, the center of Gaza's healthcare system that was attacked initially in November 2023 in the shadow of disinformation, causing international outcry. And yet, when attacked again in March 2024, destroying and burning it, it barely received any attention. The Israeli military destroyed all but the maternity building. All equipment and medical supplies were burned. We walked through its rubble when I was there last month, including 3 mass graves that were told some 170 bodies were recovered from, some unidentified. We saw mounds of charred IV lines, dialysis equipment, patient beds, and wheelchairs hanging out of blown-out walls. Everything used to heal in a hospital whose name, Al Shifa, means healing, was destroyed. I could go on and on about the Indonesian hospital, about Kamal Adwan Hospital, about Al Emirati Hospital, Al Auda Hospital, Al Nasser Hospital, Al Aqsa Hospital, Al Ahli Baptist Hospital, bombed just 3 weeks ago. Al Durra Pediatric Hospital, bombed just 4 days ago after the team tried to set up another intensive care unit there. There are no remaining pediatric intensive care units for the population in Gaza City and the north of Gaza. The organization I went to Gaza with, Medical Aid for Palestinians, helped set up a small ICU in a non-governmental hospital that didn't have an ICU before. There are 6 pediatric intensive care beds. There were no neonatal intensive care beds left for Gaza City and the north of Gaza when I was there. They set up 6 neonatal intensive care beds in that same small non-governmental hospital. So all 12 beds, PICU and NICU, have a total of 5 ventilators. 5 ventilators for over 1 million people. There are 30 ventilators sitting at the Gaza border, or in Israel, prohibited from entering Gaza. These are 30 ventilators, UNICEF ventilators, prohibited from entering Gaza. I was told just last night by one of my colleagues from UNICEF, who's currently in Gaza, that 24 newborns died in March alone because of this blockade of essential medical equipment. Unlike the first and second hospitals bombed in 2023, not even an attempted justification was required to ensure the impunity of the attacks on most of Gaza's 36 hospitals. Impunity of attacks on over 140 ambulances that were destroyed in Gaza, and the over 1,400 doctors, nurses, paramedics, and other healthcare workers that have been killed in Gaza. The hundreds of healthcare workers that have been detained unlawfully and tortured in Israeli prisons. Killing healthcare workers, bombing and destroying hospitals and ambulances has become an internationally accepted and tolerated norm. What do we tell my colleagues about why we clap and bang pots applauding our healthcare workers heroically during the COVID pandemic? While we tolerate the intentional targeting and massacre of Palestinian healthcare workers who courageously continue to provide care for their patients in the midst of genocide. What will we tell future generations about what Europe was doing when we watched as 100 children were maimed or killed every single day? As we watched as their dismembered bodies were desperately streamed by courageous Palestinian journalists when international witnesses were barred. As we watched them burn alive, including the nephews and nieces of one of my colleagues and friends in Gaza. As we saw the most live-streamed genocide in modern history be met with silence, empty words, or worse, enabling. Western governments at most express deep concern without stopping to supply Israel with the technology, intelligence, and weapons to continue this war. Do we tell future generations that Western societies gave permission to exterminate the Palestinian people? I came here today with a very small and frankly naive hope that maybe something we share with you might move this Parliament to action. And if not, at the very least, I came here today to share what we witnessed in this building so that no one here can say that they didn't know, only that they knew and they didn't do anything. I know that by virtue of being here today, many of you are already convinced of the need to act. It's not too late for many, but it's not too late for the rest. So I urge you, I implore you, no more words, please act.
Our last report is an interview that occurred on June 12th between Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! And Hala Varit. Ms. Varit was an 18-year veteran of the U.S. State Department when she resigned in 2024 in protest of our government's complicity in Israel's genocide in Gaza. She was the first State Department spokesperson or employee to publicly resign in this fashion. With Ms. Goodman, she discusses the motivations for her decision to resign and the experiences she incurred when she was working at the State Department. She talks about her decision to join the global march to Gaza, which is now beginning. And she shares her feelings about Matthew Miller's recent comments that Israel was indeed committing war crimes in Gaza when he was a spokesperson for the State Department under President Joe Biden. Mr. Miller at the time ferociously denied that Israel was either committing genocide or war crimes. Here is Hala Varit speaking with Amy Goodman.
In Gaza, Israeli forces have killed more than 120 Palestinians over the past day, including many at aid sites, bringing the official death toll to over 55,000, though that figure is believed to be a vast undercount. Gaza's government media office has accused the Israeli military of, quote, perpetuating a policy of starvation and deliberately targeting and killing starving people seeking food, unquote. This comes as thousands from around the world are arriving in Egypt for the global march to Gaza. to call for the end to Israel's genocide against Palestinians. Independent Egyptian news outlet Madamasser reports Egyptian security forces detained and deported several Turkish citizens outside their Cairo hotel, where they were spotted carrying Palestinian flags. Dozens who flew to Egypt for the march have also reportedly been turned back as they arrive at the Cairo airport, including 40 Algerian nationals this morning and an all-female Tunisian delegation. Dropsite News shared video of activists chanting as they were deported at the airport. The activists were chanting, "Shame, shame, they sold Gaza for $1," implying the Egyptian government sold out Gaza. Egypt's foreign ministry released a statement Wednesday nominally, quote, welcoming foreign delegations of the global march to Gaza, which plans to bring humanitarian aid to the Rafah border crossing in Egypt, but warned they should seek permission to cross the Sinai Desert to Rafah. Democracy Now! Spoke to one of the people planning to participate in the march, Hala Reret. She's an 18-year career diplomat who resigned from the State Department over the Biden administration's Gaza policy. She was the first State Department diplomat to publicly resign. She'd served as Arabic language spokesperson for the State Department. We spoke to her briefly on the show Tuesday, then did an extended interview. In part two, I asked her to elaborate on what made her decide to go from spokesperson to resign spokesperson to actually participating in the global march to Gaza.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. Well, fundamentally, it's the exact same answer. Diplomacy, justice, peace, equality, all of the values that I grew up with, that I cherished, all the values that we're supposed to hold dear as Americans. These are the exact same principles and reasons why I'm going, why I resigned, why I became a diplomat, why I resigned, and now why I'm joining the march. Because again, as I mentioned in part one, we cannot, as human beings, turn the blind eye to injustice. We just cannot. What type of world are we going to be living in? What type of world are we going to be allowing our children to grow up in if we stand by while an entire civilian population is forcibly starved? I'm going to say that again, forcibly starved under all of our watchful eye. Children dying of malnutrition. This is not propaganda. These are facts. We have the images. We have all of the details of these children dying of starvation while others that are trying to get them food get shot at. Simultaneously, the population continues to be bombarded. It's an absolute affront to international law, an affront to diplomacy that I dedicated my entire life to. And again, no, we can't speak anymore. We can't just talk and talk and talk and allow governments to take advantage of the cover of diplomacy to continue the injustice. At this point, it is power to the people. The people are uniting in a show of solidarity. And as you mentioned, Amy will be going to Egypt and doing a walk to Rafah, representing humanity. Over 3,000 people from over 50 countries, completely peaceful, nonviolent, a show of collective humanity saying enough is enough, break the siege, allow humanitarian aid in, and to also let the Palestinian people know that they are not alone. They are not alone. We are going to be continuing these efforts until the siege is broken.
Philippe Lazzarini, the UNRWA Commissioner General, posted on his official X account, quote, "The state of Israel must lift the siege and allow the UN safe and unhindered access to bring in aid and distribute it safely. This is the only way to avert mass starvation, including among 1 million children. Today, there are 12,000 UNRWA staff who continue providing health, sanitation, and psychosocial services under the most brutal and adverse environment. Our warehouses outside Gaza are full with a volume of assistance equivalent to 6,000 trucks. Letting food rot and medicine deliberately expire would simply be obscene," Lazzarini wrote. And it's interesting to note, Hala, that one of the responses of the Israeli government to the Gaza Freedom Flotilla was that there are proper ways to bring in humanitarian aid, and they weren't following them as they attempted to bring in aid and challenge the siege. If you can respond to Lazzarini, to Israel, and especially from your position as a longtime former spokesperson for the State Department, if you can talk about the U.S. role in all of this.
I'll respond to the Israeli point first, specifically about the Gaza Humanitarian Fund that they've set up, that they propped up, potentially with Israeli intelligence, because I want your audience to understand something very, very clearly. This is a propaganda tool. And I say this as a former spokesperson, as someone who worked in the propaganda arm, the public relations arm of the US government. I thought I was doing good at the time. If you want to feed malnourished children, you do not give them a box of pasta. You do not give them a box of rice. This is not how you treat malnourishment. This is not how you treat starvation. This is strictly not only a public relations plot, but it is additionally a financial ploy because people are benefiting. This is a private firm that was contracted. People are literally making money off of other people's starvation. An additional layer is that we've seen with our own eyes people getting shot at, the Palestinian civilians getting shot at in their desperation of trying to obtain food from the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. It is part of a systematic effort to ethnically cleanse, to potentially wipe out the population. There are irreversible damages made from a population, a civilian population that is malnourished, that is unable to properly grow. You have an entire generation that is stunted, and that is by design. When I was a spokesperson, Amy, to your point about the UN statement about allowing the UN to do its job, as a spokesperson, I was expected to say the line of UNRWA is corrupt, or UNRWA is in on it, UNRWA is full of Hamas. I asked for proof. I asked for proof for everything that I was expected to say. I had a top secret security clearance. Even if I wasn't authorized to share that proof on TV, all I asked is, you convince me of that, I will go on TV and I will say it. Spoiler alert, I never saw any proof because there is none. If there was proof that the UN was somehow in cahoots with Hamas, we would have all seen it by now. This is, again, a public relations ploy to try to divert attention from the facts on the ground, which is that forced starvation is being used as a tool of war, and that is fundamentally a war crime. The flotilla was trying to break that because governments are refusing to act. And now the Global March is going to act to also try to break that, because we will keep pressuring governments to actually do their jobs until they do them.
Hala, if you can talk about exactly, give us more details on this march, the global march to Gaza, to the Rafah border crossing in Egypt, and talk about the Egyptian government's response as well. How many people are going on it?
Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. It is really a grassroots movement, and I have to say I'm not part of the organizing committee, but I was inspired by them. They are a group of peace activists, of lawyers, of doctors, basically people from all walks of life that have been, all of us have been talking about what can we actually do as opposed to just talk. And weeks ago, if not months ago, I'm told that a core group of organizers got together. I found out about it not too long ago and decided to do whatever I can to support it. And so they approached, this core organizing committee approached the Egyptian government formally through various Egyptian embassies around the world. They met with Egyptian ambassadors around the world, in European capitals, in Canada. They gave them formal notices through diplomatic notes. So the Egyptian authorities are fully aware. They've received initial positive feedback from some of the Egyptian diplomatic missions, I'm told. And they were also, it was confirmed that they would receive a response. The march would receive a response from Cairo in terms of a permit for a march at some point. The good news is that we have not received a no which I think is obviously a good sign. And I want to stress that this march does not at all aim to undermine, because there have been some concerns that I want to alleviate. It's not at all aimed to undermine Egyptian authority or Egyptian sovereignty. It is quite the opposite. It is very much in line with Egypt's diplomatic efforts. Egypt has been calling on an end to the siege. Egypt has been calling on a ceasefire. They've been in the negotiations to try to achieve a ceasefire. And so this is in support of that. And we're going to be landing, as I mentioned, on Thursday in Cairo. Some participants are already there. It's going to be, the number is increasing every time I speak to them, but definitely over 3,000 from over 50 countries. And we're going to make our way from Cairo to El Arish in the Sinai. And then from Friday, we're going to start walking from El Arish to Rafah. We're going to be walking for 2 or 3 days in the Sinai desert. And then once we arrive to Rafah, we are not planning on storming the border. This, again, is a purely peaceful, non-violent march in solidarity with the Palestinian people. We are going to camp out in Rafah, and we're going to try to make a statement of collective humanity. We're going to, again, be representing the world with our over 50 delegations, and we're going to be insisting that this will keep happening over and over again until the siege is broken. We will camp out for a few days to try to hopefully make that statement loud and clear and try to effect some change until we return back to Cairo.
Are there government officials who will be in this delegation, or former spokespeople like yourself, you a former State Department spokesperson?
I know that there are European members of parliament that have joined the march. They've also, others have also signed letters in support of the march. I know that there are current diplomats, I'm not sure from which countries, but I know that there are current diplomats that are also joining the march. Again, peace activists, lawyers, doctors, artists. It is, for me, honestly, Amy, it's a beautiful show of human solidarity. And when I see all of this injustice in the world, whether it's in Los Angeles, whether we're talking about kidnapping people and sending them to El Salvador, this gives me hope. People from all around the world, they're not benefiting from this. They're leaving their jobs, they're leaving their families behind, but they're standing together and saying, this is not okay. It's not okay that children are starving. It's not okay that children are being bombarded every day. Illegal occupation cannot exist in 2025. And this, to me, already gives me hope. It's a show of a beautiful human unity, and this is what we need. And just like the flotilla inspired millions around the world, we're hoping that this march inspires millions around the world, because fundamentally, this is the way things change. I served in South Africa as a diplomat, and I learned so much from that experience, but fundamentally, it was the power of the people that ended apartheid in South Africa, and the movement is underway as well for Palestine.
I wanted to ask you about a former colleague of yours, former State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller under President Biden, who recently made headlines when he admitted Israel had committed war crimes in Gaza, something he never said from the State Department podium.
I don't think it's a genocide, but I think I think it is without a doubt true that Israel has committed war crimes.
You wouldn't have said that at the podium.
Yeah, look, because when you're at the podium, you're not expressing your personal opinion. You're expressing the conclusions of the United States government.
So I'm wondering if you can respond to what the former State Department spokesperson under Biden, Matt Miller, is saying on Sky News. Did it surprise you, Ghela?
I can absolutely respond, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. It is absolutely disgusting. That's it. I'm going to be very blunt, Amy, because I worked in the exact same office as Matthew Miller. The reports that I mentioned that I wrote on a daily basis when I was a spokesperson, they went up that chain. They went up to Global Public Affairs. I knew he knew because I was drafting reports showing the war crimes. When I was asked to spread those lies, I said, I cannot spread lies. I swore an oath to the U.S. Constitution when I became a diplomat. I had a top secret security clearance. That means we don't violate laws. We don't violate U.S. laws. We don't violate international laws. And if you are a true patriot, if you are truly a diplomat, You do not do as you are told when you know it is illegal. You do not do as you're told when you know it is immoral, when it is inhumane, and fundamentally as well, when you know it is a threat to U.S. national security, which we all knew, which I was also documenting. As far as I'm concerned, Matthew Miller has blood on his hands because he knew what he was doing was wrong. And why was he doing it? For careerism. I'm going to be very blunt, Amy.
That's our program today. As always, thank you for watching. I'm Mark Hage. This is the Vermont Report on Palestine, Israel. We'll see you soon, I hope.